Okay, we're going to finish this up here, everybody. Sorry for all the issues we're having, but this is par for the course where I live with this internet issue. So I've got now the file copied over to see how the Joy-Cons work in comparison to the rest of it here. So let's pull that file up. Let's see if this is the one. Yep, there it is. I'm going to pull this up for you to see in just a second here. So I want to make sure we are back for real now, hopefully. All right. So let's take a look at the screen now so we can see how the Joy-Con works in comparison. So as a matter of comparison here, the Joy-Con on its own, we'll measure now, but we got about 76 milliseconds of latency using the 8bitdo adapter here, as you can see on screen there. And if we scroll back to here, let's take a look and see how long it takes for this to register. All right, that's a good shot there. And we'll wait for the finger to be pushed down on the Joy-Con so we can get a feel for that. All right, almost there. All right, so push the button right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Ah. You know, it's about the same. I got about 21 on that. Let's try it again here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 17. It's about 17, 18 versus 19. So it's pretty close to the Joy-Con. I'm going to just count it one more time just to make sure I wasn't off on that. So yeah, about 68 milliseconds. Typically, I was seeing about 66 milliseconds or so with the Pro controller on screen here. So it looks like this is about what you would get with a regular Nintendo controller here. So you know, about 76 milliseconds on the 8bitdo, a little less, 68 milliseconds on the Nintendo stuff. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other on that front there. So that is how that works. So in any event, that is it. I think, I just wanted to get one of these installed and see how it works. I think what I'm going to do, maybe I'll do this now before I close up. I just want to try to get the gap closed on that. So let me zoom out my PTZ camera here and get a better view. So let's zoom this out. Isn't that cool? I want to get this gap closed on the controller here. Let me get it in frame so you can see it. So that gap, I want to get that more flush. I think I can get that more flush, actually. So let me just tilt the camera a little bit, and we'll do that. And then I will have enough, I think, to record a review and tell you what I think of this thing. All right, so got that centered there. We'll zoom in a little bit. Yeah, if I can get that a little more flush, I think I'd be happier. So let me see if I can figure that out real quick. That's cool. I'm so glad that Martin told me about that tester thing that's built into the Switch controller. That's really cool. All right. So let me just take this apart real quick, and you can see, this is kind of like the reverse now. You can see what it looks like, again, now installed. So we're going to try to get that more flush here. So let's get these screws undone. So you can see the final product. We know it works now. We converted this old NES controller into a new one. That's cool. So they have kits now for the old NES controller. They have them for the SNES controller. They also have them for the NES Classic and the SNES Classic controllers. So if you have one of the newer ones, you can convert those to wireless. About 20 bucks a piece. You got to order direct from 8bitdo at the moment. I don't see them on Amazon. And then they also have one for the Sega Genesis 6-button controller. And I don't have one of those because I had the old 3-button configuration, so I never had one of those. And let's get this out of here. And I'll just show you what it looks like inside. I'm just going to try to get that. That was the one issue that I ran into, was that ribbon cable and the connector at the top. So hopefully we can get that resolved. Now this will also be the process, by the way. If you ever have to do a firmware update, this is what you're going to have to do, is take apart the controller to get at that circuit board where the USB port is. All right. Okay, so this is what we got right there. Let's get it back on frame for you. So I'm just going to try to get this. I don't think I can go any lower with this, actually, now I'm looking at it, because this is about as low as I can get. So it looks like that is going to stick out a little bit, unless I can get this. Yeah, see, there's not enough ribbon cable to kind of go around this thing here, unless there is. Oh, there is. Maybe there is. Okay. I just don't like how much it's stretching it. Let's see. Yeah, see, it doesn't really fit like that, so it has to go in. Yeah, I think they gave you just a little too much ribbon cable on this. And it looks like, I guess I was right the first time, I just don't have enough room to get this completely gap-free. So this is about as good as I can get. Let me show you what that looks like. I can zoom in on that, can't I? I can bring it closer to the camera. So let's take a little bit closer look here. Give it the focus. That's the one thing, this PTZ optics camera also usually focuses very well. I might just be too close for it right now. Let me try to zoom in on it down here. That might be easier. Let me get my zoom out. There it goes. Look at that. So there's a bit of a gap there. I can't find a way to, short of like shaving off that little plastic piece, getting that gap away. Let's put this back on. Maybe I did better this time. Let's take a look. Yeah, so it'll stick out a little bit. That might drive some people crazy, but it doesn't bother me all that much. So that is that. So I did find some time. Oh, and here's the other thing that I found too when you're playing around with this, that the control pad, the rubber part for the control pad tends to stick up on you. So when you put it back together, you don't want to put it flat down. Let me zoom out. Because if you push on a button while it's face down, it pushes the entire thing up here, as you can see. So I'm pushing the button. See that? Pushes it up. So we're going to snap it all back into place, put the cover back on, and now we're going to screw it back together. And that will be it for the stream. So I would love to take some questions if anybody is still watching. I have no idea if the stream has been active or not. It looks like now I've got decent bandwidth again. So if anyone has a question, I know there's 36 of you still hanging on here. Thank you for that. Definitely ask away. If not, I'm going to probably wrap this up in a few minutes and get a video done on this cool little product and go from there. So ask away in the chat log here if anybody has questions. Computer technician, is a Sony Handycam 4K A33 good for YouTube? I think, is that the one I have? I think I have that one, or the prior version. I like the Sony cameras a lot because the image quality on their sensors is fantastic. But the issue I have with the Sony cameras is that their autofocus is very slow. And if you are like a one-person operation like I am, where you need the camera to focus for you, the Sony cameras are not as good. They take, they do the face recognition and everything. That's not a problem, but the actual focusing is very slow on them, and they often focus on the wrong things and yada yada. So that's been my big gripe with them, is the focus is just, the autofocus is just really slow. The Canons, for whatever reason, Canon has very fast focus features. And they are better at the autofocus, at least in my experience. And I have not bought a Sony camcorder in about 3 years. So perhaps they've improved it since then, but that was my experience with them. And I think what concerns me about the camcorder market, at least in the sense of getting more innovation in the camcorder market, is that we're nearing kind of the end of people buying camcorders. So they're becoming more, I don't want to say they're a niche product, but I think they're becoming a niche product, that people who need a camcorder are few and far between. I think if you're out looking for a nice camera to take pictures of kids or whatever that are coming into your life, like you might want the SLR, and now the SLRs do video, and they've got that really fancy film look to it. Thank you, Fernie Lopez, for your Super Chat contribution. we might need to take those super chats and buy a new internet connection. I'm actually going to call, here's what I'm going to do today. Because I want to do these streams like every Friday, because I have time on Fridays. And I am probably going to call Comcast and say, what are my options? Because I'm not asking for much bandwidth here, but I need more than I have. I mean, it's so crazy because the other thing that I'm doing, or we're doing here on the channel is, you know, the weekly wrap-up show is something I love to do because it's a great way to connect with the audience, all of you. But it is something that doesn't get watched long after it's produced, right? So it kind of dies after 2 or 3 days. So what we've been doing is grabbing these snippets and putting the snippets on in other places. So, for example, we've had the snippets running on the Snippets channel on YouTube, but we've also been putting the snippets now on Facebook, and then I have a LinkedIn thing that I've been doing, and then we've got Twitter, perhaps in certain instances. And the problem is that we have to upload those files over and over again, and it takes a really long time to get all of this stuff working because it takes forever to upload this stuff. And it's been very frustrating because now, you know, I'm paying people here to do that. So I have Corey and James who work for me, and I'm paying both of them to upload stuff. And if my upload speed is 10 megabits per second, and has been for many years, if it takes them, you know, 4 times as long to upload everything, it's costing me money. So I may just look at what Comcast has for better upstream. And, you know, I was thinking about all this downstream stuff. Do I need gigabit here? Probably not. I really don't need gigabit because I just need the upload. That's the more important thing. So that's what I'm kind of focused on here. Angela wants to know what happened to my Dad Pro Tips channel. It still exists. I'm just not, this is not my focus. So I am doing the Dad Pro Tips thing when I have time. I have a few videos ready to go, or a few things that I have to shoot for that. But it's not going to be like this channel is, because it's, you know, it just takes a long time to make good reviews. And right now, this is what is driving my growth as a content creator is this channel. So let's take a look at my cores here. Let's pull, oh, you know what? I don't think my B button is connected. Oh, great. I think I got to take it apart again. I screwed it up. I must have knocked the buttons off. Great. In any event, I got work to do, folks. I'm going to go get this thing taken care of. But the good news is this does work. It's not working at the moment just because I screwed it up. I have to reassemble this and get the buttons reattached. So you have to be careful when you're putting it back together. But it works great. Not a lot of latency. We saw that on the Switch and on the Analog NT here. Just a little bit of latency, not all that noticeable. So something I'm probably going to be giving a pretty favorable review for when we get into it. So stay tuned for that. Next review up is an Asus laptop with an MX150 built in, kind of a really nice college laptop. So that one is going up next. And then after that, I will probably post this. So you might not see this one until Sunday, maybe. We'll see how that laptop review goes. What I've been trying to do is not upload new videos until the old one has kind of gotten viewed, you know, like, so I see the drop off on the real-time thing, and then it goes from there. So 4 Guys with Quarters wants to know, is this worth it? I think it is. So here's where I would think it's worth it. First of all, again, I'm not dissatisfied with the latency on it. So we've got good latency. So you know your display will obviously have more of an impact than the controller will. I like the ease of installation, minus the fact that I just screwed it up. The pairing seems to work once all the firmware on your receivers is working. And if you like the way your old Nintendo controller feels, you can't get better than the original. So you're getting, you know, new electronics, but the physical part of the controller is the same. So therefore, I think it's something that I am recommending. The Wax got the Genesis version, so he thinks that's working pretty well for him. They only have it on the 6-button version. And so what happened with me back in the 90s with the Genesis was that I got my Genesis in 1989. In fact, that's the one I got. It still works. I just have, I have another one upstairs that I use. And it came with those big 3-button controllers. And then as time went on, I got more into PC gaming and kind of dropped off the console scene for a while. So when the 6-button controller came out with Street Fighter, I didn't I didn't get it. And then I ended up getting like one of these cheap aftermarket 6-button controllers, which still works, by the way, but it's not going to be compatible with the mod here. So that was what happened there. So it looks like these buttons must have gotten disconnected here. So let's take this apart again real quick and see if I can. So I think this is the one thing you run into with these things, is that if you're, as you're putting these things back together, if you move something out, something gets out of whack, you lose the buttons. So you got to really make sure you mash it together well. Actually, you know what? I think the button stopped working. Let me reset the analog here. Maybe that might be what's going on. That's funny. Because technically, you could operate this without the controller at all, if you want, without the actual hardware. So these buttons are not working. I wonder if I did something. Huh. Let's take a look at this real quick. Oh, the buttons are falling out. I'm totally breaking this right now. Let me. I don't think there's any way to really kill power to this thing either, short of just. All right, so let's take it all apart and figure out what I did wrong here. So I got it still connected here. So let's take this thing and put it down on top. Yeah, something happened here. Yeah, so this works. This part of it works. I'm sure I'm probably going to short out something here. So that works fine. But these buttons just stopped working. Look at that. I wonder if I have to repair it. Maybe that might be, maybe the pairing got off or something on it. Let's take a look and see if I can. Yeah, I'm going to put it all back together here again and figure it out. So it looks like something happened there. So you do the charging is pretty easy. There's a cable that comes with it that connects up. Let me switch over back to this view here. Connects up to the end of the little connector that sticks out of the controller. So it's very easy to charge. Firmware updates are going to be the problem with this, because the firmware is likely going to be a USB-based thing, and the USB port is on the front of this, and it's covered up by the controller when it's put back together. So you could have a scenario where you need a firmware update, and you're going to have to go in, the old-fashioned way and get your firmware back up on there. So that's my only concern is that, but everything else seems to be working fine. Okay, so got that put together. Let's put the board back down on top of it here, and get that in place. Yeah, that ribbon cable, I keep mentioning this, the ribbon cable seems to be the biggest point of contention that I have with it. It just doesn't have a place to go. And I'm guessing now these buttons aren't working because I have a pairing issue. So let's repair the controller now. I'm just going to shut this thing down and start over again before I screw everything back together. So the Wax 70 is saying that the Genesis version works with the Hyperkin replica of the controller. Well, that's interesting. Though I had to send the wire hole, we had to sand the wire hole a bit. Yeah, so I think, if you can, I would guess for the most part, if they're following the molds of the original controllers, you should be fairly successful at getting this to work. So let me just make sure I'm in the right mode here. So I hit Start plus B to put it into that mode real quick. I bet you I probably changed modes. I didn't change to the other mode on this. This is probably why we're getting this issue. Oh, okay, so Amir Jubran wants to know if I could use the controller test ROM to see if diagonals hit on accident. Okay, so let's try that next, if I can get the... Yeah, so the buttons don't work anymore. Huh. All right, let me just kill the... Okay, let me restart this from the top here and see if I can get this to work. It might still have been in switch modes. Maybe there's a button mapping issue. Let's select here. Okay, start pairing. Hope I didn't short out something when I took it apart again. Let's see. Everything's going haywire. Okay, now we're paired. And the analog is freaking out. There's this one thing that I push on the analog that like locks it up, so that might have been what happened there. All right, so there we go. Okay, we're back. All right, so I'm just going to screw this thing back together, and then we will run that test for Amir real quick. And Amir, if you could, tell me exactly what you want me to look for. So you're saying if I'm pushing to the right, does it accidentally go diagonal down? Is that what you're trying to see? All right, so get that in there. You know, it's funny, so I say this now, the stream is working better that I rebooted the router, so I'm wondering if that was my issue with streaming, but still I'm going to need to try to find a better upstream scenario here. And I think if I have Comcast Business, at least they have to fix it, which means I'm going to be paying more. And apparently, if they know that you're having some kind of business activity on your home internet, they charge you a fee for that, supposedly. All right, so I'm just screwing this back together so you know what I'm doing. And then we'll go back in and run that controller test again. I think, by the way, that this Analog NT Mini, if you were a fan of the 80s, as I was and am, for 80s video games, I mean, it is awesome because I can play all of my old ColecoVision games, and it's FPGA, it's very accurate, and the image quality is fantastic. It's better than you remember it, actually, because we were all using these really lousy color TVs back then. Actually, I had a black and white TV in my bedroom. That's what I used in my bedroom with my ColecoVision most of the time. So I play Pac-Man in black and white on my Atari 2600, and we had a Zenith, a 20-inch Zenith down in the living room. Yeah, I think the biggest issue people are going to run into with these is putting them back together, because you want to make sure nothing shifts around when you put everything back in. That I can see being an issue. So let's go over to NES, and we're going to try that. Samir said the old 8bitdo PCBs had major dead problems, but it looks like they have been fixed. Yeah, I think they've really been getting better with their stuff. And stuff was good. I really liked the 8bitdo stuff just because it feels authentic to me. All right, so let's load up the controller test here. And we'll just do this. Okay, so if you can see this, so I'm doing diagonal. Oh, this is funny. So this thing like lights up. It's white initially, and then when you push the button down, it changes to red. I didn't even notice that before. Okay, so I'm going to go left. So diagonal, down. So we'll say down, left. Yeah, it looks pretty. Feels pretty accurate to me. I have to tighten it up a little bit more still, but yeah, it feels pretty good. I think it's one of those things too, you probably aren't going to really notice it until you're actually in the game, and you know there's certain games you get this muscle memory for that really gets it down. But I think really the big thing here is getting these screws tightened up, and the screwdriver it comes with is not that good. So that will be one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this, is really get a good screwdriver beyond the one that it comes with, because you don't want any flux. If it's loose at all, it will impact your gameplay. But it seems to be working there. And Steve Fox about the Odroid. Yeah, I'm going to take a look at it. Here's the thing with the retro stuff. I love looking at the retro stuff because I really enjoy looking at it. From a traffic standpoint, those things don't always do the best on the channel, so they tend to be things that I get to when I don't have anything new that's come in. So I'm definitely interested in them. The big thing is like, what can it do better than the Raspberry Pi? And if you're on the Facebook group, if you can go there and leave me some thoughts on that, that would be great. So Amir was saying with the old 8bitdo, he kept ducking with Mario. So, let's load up Mario real quick, and then we'll call it a day here. So let me go back up to my. So what I'll do now is I'll load up Super Mario here and see how that plays. Super Mario Brothers. Yeah, I think really getting the controller tight, getting all the screws back in as tight as they were when you had it is really critical to this thing. All right, so let's take a look here. Yeah, it's funny, the controller feels a little different than I remembered it feeling just because it's a little loose. I really got to tighten up the stuff here. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I mean, it feels, you know. Yeah, I really got to tighten this up a little bit. Yeah, how you piece the controller back together, by the way, is really going to make the difference here, because it feels a little looser than it did before, and that's my fault. Yeah, this button feels a little weird right now. That's, again, it's just, I think it's my lack of skill in putting this back together. And it could be that this part here needs just a little tighter on the screw. Because what happens is these buttons, when you push the button down, it's actually putting stress on the whole, you know, it's pushing down against the bottom portion there. So that feels pretty good. I'm not very good at these games to begin with, so it doesn't help. Yeah, he's not ducking. I just did that duck just to see if it responds to it. Yeah, it seems to be working. It's good. Yeah. That's the nice thing about this is that, you know, the electronics are changing, but the actual pads and the things that are connecting to those electronics are the same. So cool. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good, folks. So I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit more here at the bottom. And these screws are just old as you know what. Yeah, that's better. And it might be completely hard to replicate the entire, the actual real tightness you had once before on these things. It's really tight. I just don't want to strip these screws in case I ever want to get into this thing again. Yes, you want to hear and see where you can hear it kind of like creaking and just get those spots tightened up. Yeah. Yeah, it's better. It's getting there. It's funny, too, how the case not being completely tight impacts the feel of the controller. That works. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I tell you, like I mentioned before, I just love this analog NT Mini. I think it's really one of the best things ever, especially for fans of the 80s, because you can just load up. So I can just show you what I do here. So I can, it's the other, so I can go to core here. Let's close out. Let me see core options. Let me back out of here completely. Yes. So I can go, for example, from the NES to the ColecoVision. And what happens here is that it flushes out the FPGA, and then it loads back in. Thank you, Amir. Much appreciated. It flushes out the NES, and now it's basically turning it into a ColecoVision. Nice and tight now. So now we're in a different system. So one of my favorite games when I was a kid on the ColecoVision was Bump and Jump. Now the one issue that the ColecoVision core is what they call these things. The one issue with the core on this one is that it doesn't have a the number pad. So on the old ColecoVision, you used to select your game type. So we have to select just the first one because we have no other way to do like the harder skill levels and stuff. But this was a fun game. So what you used to do in this game is you drove around, and what you're supposed to do is not run the cars. Well, you can run the cars off the road if you want, but you got a bonus if you didn't. But it was always fun to see how many cars you could destroy. And then the harder levels, they'd have like dump trucks and tanks, and like the tanks had these those tank shreds on them, and they'd run you off the road and everything. So it's kind of fun to see how that works. What's funny, using this this real NES controller as a wireless controller is it gives you a sense as to how good the actual 8bitdo controllers are, because those controllers really feel very similar to the originals. And if anything, the reason why this one feels the way it does is just because it's probably been broken in after 30 years of off and on gameplay and whatnot. So that could be part of why it feels like it does. And of course, these games used to be played with an analog joystick that was on the ColecoVision. They had these weird they look like telephones with this analog controller at the top. And there was a remade, that AT Games made a ColecoVision throwback console. And unfortunately, it was not an analog stick, so you couldn't do diagonals and whatnot with it. But so then at the end of the level, this goes on in perpetuity. This game doesn't end. So you go through the seasons, and it gets a little harder each time. And really, it doesn't matter to see how long you can drive for. And I used to see how many cars I could knock off the road in each stage. So yeah, it's pretty simple fun. ColecoVision was great. But they had some really good arcade ports on the Coleco. So that was good. Venom wants to know, are we going to see any PC stick reviews? Yes. As soon as I get more, I will. Whenever I see one, I do one. I'd love to get a Core M3-based stick PC. We did just get the GPD Win 2, so that's coming up very shortly. So we're going to be working on that. This is Burger Time on the Coleco. And back in the day, like these arcade conversions were, in my opinion, the best out there on a console, at least for the short time the Coleco was relevant. Obviously, if you played the arcade version, it's going to look a lot sharper on the arcade version. But the controls are feeling pretty good on this, and if you were playing at home, it was a very good arcade experience. Donkey Kong, I think they had a really good Donkey Kong thing. This was back when Nintendo actually licensed games to people. So this is the Donkey Kong on ColecoVision. Yeah, Commodore 64 had some really good arcade conversions too. And Angelo Salino wants to know, my primary phone, my daily driver is the iPhone 10. I use this phone all the time. I've tried to use, part of what happens is you get into the ecosystem of the service that you're using. So, for example, for me, I've been an iPhone user for a while. My entire family are iPhone users. Everyone's on the photo stream together. So you get into this thing where you're in the ecosystem. And the other thing on the Apple side is that there's some apps that I run that are only on the iPhone right now. So my task manager, for example, is OmniFocus. I use it exclusively. It's on my Mac, on my phone. It's not available for any other platform. So a lot of my productivity is kind of tied to the phone. And to be honest with you, I just like the iPhone. I've tried Android phones. There's some really nice ones out there, but I keep coming back to the iPhone. I'm just very happy with it. I like the camera on it. I just like the fact that it works most of the time. So I don't get my emulators on the phone, but I can live. I have my GPD. So that's the other thing. I have a really cool little Android handheld. I got that GPD XD that I do all my game emulation on, so that works pretty well. So yeah, this was done. I used to play a lot of this when I was a kid. So I think like Coleco was big for, at least where I was, all my friends had a ColecoVision. It was a big deal with us, I think probably in I think I got mine in 83. I was in second grade. And the build quality of the ColecoVision hardware was horrible. I think I went through like 5 or 6 of them on that front. But so that's the ColecoVision core. And I got all these other cores. I can load up Game Boy games. I mean, it's really awesome, like all these different things that it can do. And of course, the quintessential Atari 2600 is the other one. Yeah, if I ever have a broken MacBook, John, I'm going to have Louis Rossman fix it. He seems to know what he's doing. You know what I like about him, too, is that I think he's largely self-taught, but he's trying to do things the right way. And that comes back to this whole discussion of right to repair. Because, I think the manufacturers are concerned that, people are going to really mess stuff up if they have the ability to acquire these parts that are usually, restricted to the the authorized service centers or the retail stores. In the case of Apple, like the Apple retail service centers. And I get where they're coming from the manufacturer side, because you certainly don't want to have a situation where people are potentially risking life, liberty, and or life and property, because these things have lithium-ion batteries in them. If you're not servicing things properly, you could cause a fire, yada yada. There's no certification process anywhere for any of this stuff. So whether you're good or not, really, or capable of it, is really determined on how well you understand what you're doing. And like in my state, what's funny is that if I want to repair TVs or radios, I have to get a license from the state to do that. But if I want to repair computers, cell phones, anything that's not a TV or a radio, I don't need a license. Isn't that funny? So I can see where the manufacturers are coming from, because they're concerned that, oh my gosh, something bad could happen. We could be on the hook because we sold this guy who wasn't capable of fixing the device properly. We sold him parts. He opened up a store. He started fixing phones, and now the houses are burning down because he didn't do the batteries properly. So I can see where they're coming from on that. On the other side, I think if there was some kind of certification process they could introduce to let people like Louis Rossmann, who knows what he's doing, be able to more efficiently run his business. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't want that, but I don't understand these companies. But I agree, John, that right to repair is important. I think what's going to happen eventually is, it's going to be a state-by-state issue. What you're going to see, in my opinion, is, and it's going to cost taxpayers money in the end, I guess, but the manufacturers are not going to want to have to certify people. So they're going to probably have to create some kind of permitting structure, or licensing structure, so that you can prove that you know how to fix this stuff, and that's where it'll end up. I think what would be better would be for the companies to have to just, first of all, provide the parts, and then provide some kind of, some certification process. Because you need to know as a consumer whether or not this person you're sending the thing to is certified. And I had no idea in my state you could open up a mall kiosk and fix phones without any kind of certification. It's scary, actually. And actually, it's funny, Louis Rossmann repairs stuff that these guys fix sometimes. So my father used to do TV repair too. My grandfather in Brooklyn, New York, had a record store, and they used to repair radios and record players and that kind of thing. Yeah, and John, that's a good point too. So there's a great channel that I've been watching, Rich Rebuilds, and he's been rebuilding Teslas and stockpiling parts and everything. And there's definitely, I mean, that's the thing. Even with these lithium-ion batteries, even the battery in here, I mean, those batteries are volatile if overcharged or something happens to them. So you got to be really careful with this stuff, and having certifications of some kind, I think, are kind of important to do. And Angela's right, you can void your warranty in a whole bunch of ways now, even jailbreaking or doing some kind of software firmware update. What's funny is that the hardware is so malleable now. It's like this console is a great example of this. When it boots up, it will play Nintendo games that are plugged into the cartridge slot on the top here. But it doesn't just do that, right? We booted up the Sega Master System, which is a totally different processor on here. You can boot up the Sega, the Game Boy, which is different. So it does Z80, it does 6502, and it's a kind of a blank slate of hardware. It's really hardware that can be mimicking other hardware. So really, it's as much software as it is hardware there. So that's it. So Honor, thank you for dropping by, and hope you all enjoyed this. I think what I'm going to do in the future is when I do one of these streams is reboot my router before I start, because this has been going now better than the entire stream did earlier. And I think that might be our issue. I'm only uploading, by the way, at 2 megabits per second. So I'm really trying to keep the frame rate, or the bit rate, reasonable here. So we'll have to see what happens with it. So yeah, so this seems to work. My final thought on this before I depart, because I have to get some stuff done here, is that you need to make sure you get these screws really tight when you put it back together. And I don't know if the screwdriver that it comes with is well suited for that. It doesn't feel like it's going to hold up very well for most folks. So I think really getting a good screwdriver that can get those screws nice and tight, probably even better, maybe get new screws in case you strip anything on the output there. But it does feel pretty good. And this is an original NES controller that is now wireless, which I think is just awesome. So that is it. So folks, I'm going to call it a day. Actually, one more question here from Saad Alkabar. Am I going to do software reviews at some point in the future? have done a few occasionally. I think if I can do a really effective how-to, I might. You know, I do some of the stuff with Synology and the backup and stuff, so I might do, if I come across something that really I think might be useful to people, I might do that. And then Amir wants to know, will Amazon carry these? I would imagine at some point they'll show up on Amazon. I did ask them what the, you know, when they're going to be out there. My gut on this is that this is not a mass market kind of product, so I think they'll probably not sell them on Amazon. Just I think the price would be too high with what Amazon takes off the top. So my guess would be probably just direct from 8bitdo, but it works. It's good stuff. So, all right, folks, I'm going to head on to my next project here, get this video shot, and then clean up this disaster of a room that I'm in right now. So I want to thank everyone for bearing with me with our usual issues with the streaming once again. And I will be back again next time, everyone. So look for another review coming up tonight of that Asus laptop I mentioned. That's going to be up tonight. This will probably come up, today's Friday, maybe Saturday or Sunday we'll do this one. And then next week we'll look at the GPD Win 2. So until next time, everybody, I will see you all on the interwebs. Bye-bye.